Hi, guys. Welcome back to In the Flow podcast. I am here today with Wendy Rosa, and she is a intuitive energy healer, and she's the founder of the School of Intuitive Studies. I am super honored and grateful to have her here. She is releasing a book called Becoming an Empowered Empath that I read, and it is absolutely brilliant. Wendy, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So Wendy's book is relevant to everything. It's relevant to, really if you are somebody who identifies as an empath, energetically sensitive. And she has a beautiful story of just kind of, I think something that a lot of people can relate to, having been somebody, personally, who I feel very in touch with the energy of others. So I don't know, Wendy, if you just kind of want to jump in and tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got to where you are, and then we'll dive into all things Empowered Empath.
Sure, absolutely. So, I really didn't identify with the word empath for many years until several years ago. Up until then, when I was a child, I was having extraordinary, overly empathic experiences, oversensitive experiences. I didn't know this yet. I didn't know this as a child, but as an adult, training as an intuitive, I started to realize that in my childhood, I was clairvoyant, I was clairsentient, I was clairaudient, I was claircognizant. I was kind of intuitive throughout my whole body. But to a child who's raised in an environments where that's not part of the norm or in our social structure, family system, I was odd. I felt uncomfortable. I was overly sensitive. I couldn't make sense of the experience I was having, and so I ended up experiencing a lot of weight gain, a lot of anxiety, some depression. It accelerated throughout my adolescence and then into my teenage life. I was the oldest of 8 children, so I was taking care of kids and my family, and so I didn't have much of a childhood, and I didn't have much of a self in my childhood as a result. And that's important later in life for empaths to have. But as a child, I didn't, and teenager, and then eventually I had a nervous breakdown, and out of that came this awareness of, my intuitive abilities, and I pursued training in it and a deeper understanding of what was going on for me. So then I became an intuitive healer. Give me the abridged version. I became an intuitive healer and worked with people, and it and people wanted to learn how to do what I do, so I eventually started teaching and eventually the school. But being an empath came out of, or the awareness of being an empath came out of many people having oversensitive experiences as the collective started to present more essentially trauma in the field. And so that's when I started to really hone in on this. What is this oversensitivity piece that I have and the empathic nature I have? And what are the tools and resources I have that can support people? And that's what brought me to writing the book.
So beautiful and so needed. You're right. I mean, like in everything, it's like really under, it's really, we're all under aware of why of these experiences, right? And for me, it's like that tool of awareness, and the ability to really understand how to ground and how to root and how to create boundaries. And like this is fundamental stuff that in order for us to actually, really live in that really fulfilled and use that, the empathic abilities that we have, use them to our advantage, right? And instead of letting them, kind of, sometimes it can just be messy, right? If we don't know how to set boundaries, clear our energy, and really hone in on that intuition and embody it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Totally. So one of the things that I really love about the book, and for me that really hit home, was, the emphasis on rooting and grounding, and how important as an empathetic person that is to really everything. Do you want to just dive a little bit into that and what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So grounding is connection to the earth's frequency. And, and from a physiological perspective, we do that through the soles of our feet and being in nature. Energetically, we literally, our soul will find its dwelling place inside our body. And sometimes that's not deep down. Sometimes the concentration of our consciousness is more awake in the upper body than it is in the lower power centers of the body. And that is because we might have in the lower half of our body a lot of potentially conditioning, unprocessed emotions, maybe unprocessed experiences that relate to our human condition and our human experience in the world. And so grounding is about allowing ourselves to be aware of what we're holding, and even healing what we're holding lower in the body, so that more of our spirit, more of our power, more of our consciousness can open up lower in the body. And that includes our tailbone and that's our root chakra, and our legs and our feet. So grounding is this process of coming into the center midline of our body and grounding down through our body and becoming more embodied as a spirit, as a soul in our body. It's just that as sensitive beings raised in, the conditioning we've been raised in the systems we've been raised in the world, we're not always supported in being embodied and grounded and in our power, in our lower chakras specifically.
Yeah. I love that I wrote it down because it was like, our soul and where that is in our body, right, can be a little bit too high, right? And that's something that personally I haven't even tapped into or thought about. So that's so transformative for me, just even in this moment, really thinking about how to harness that really rooted, grounded ability, and to really use those lower chakras, as, because I think, like, grounding, you hear a lot about grounding, and it's not an uncommon term, I think, in the spiritual community, but this definition of it, Wendy, is beautiful because it really allows me to give a visual to the experience of what it means to be grounded, and to, like, it's fun to picture my soul in my body and be like, okay, I need to give it a home. Like, that feels really good and really resonant.
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting though too, and just an aspect of this is that, because when we're born into our physical form, we're born into root chakra consciousness at the base of our spine, and that's our physical connection to this planet. That's our ability to feel safe and belonging and sense of security, and we get our primary needs met, and it's our survival. But when we're raised in environments where safety is compromised, or the sense of belonging is, meaning I just don't feel safe in this family, I don't feel like the black sheep, I feel like I don't fit, all those, I don't belong on this planet, those types of deeper existential type sensations or feelings, and sometimes beliefs that people carry, which are so part of the sensitive and spiritual community. I mean, people do feel that way. But what that indicates is that there is a contracted root chakra at the base of the spine. And the root chakra contracts because it is self-preserving. It's operating in the awareness that, okay, it's not okay for me, my soul, to be at home in my body, in this environment I'm in, whether it's the family structure or society at large. And so therefore the root chakra starts to contract, and that's when the spirit starts to lift up higher in the body. And the second chakra is the empathic power center in the body, and its job is to feel everything that's going on the subtle level, and to be very in tuned with the feminine and creativity and passion and all of these things. And so what happens is the second chakra starts to open up, and then we're in a hypervigilance, paying attention to what everybody else is doing around us in order for us to feel safe. And in that hypervigilance, that opening, we start to lose our boundaries. We start to lose our energy. We start to over caretake in that area of the body. And that pattern repeats itself in life. But so when we come to grounding, like sometimes, and I want to give the benefit of the doubt to people who are saying, I'm trying to ground, I keep trying, and people, and because there is such great effort in grounding, but sometimes grounding means I need to really look at the construct of my first and second chakras specifically. And I
Mm.
need to start to soften the unfurling of where I learned pre-verbally or before the age of 7 that my root chakra was not going to be a dwelling place for my soul to exist in its power. And I need to shift that. I need to change that relationship with my body. And as I start to feel safe in who I am and in my sense of belonging here, and that's when I can really ground and find home in myself. And then we work on the other chakras. That's the other part of it.
And then we move on from there. But yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And also, right in your book, you have audios that go along with that and the meditations that help you to really do that, right? And to really move into that area of our body. And yeah, and to kind of, it's always it's funny because no matter what we do, we have to go back to those really, really young, early ages,
Yeah.
to really, we have to. And I was just having a conversation with somebody else where it was the same thing. It's like, we have to look at different things that have happened in our childhood and or before we even realized it, and we have to reconnect with our body, and how important understanding that those lower level chakras really are, because even in my first couple of years of spiritual development, I think I was just like, open my third eye and I want my crown open, and as an
Right.
empath, as an empathetic person and as an empath and all of these other things, it was just like, sometimes I was just like, I couldn't organize. I couldn't really figure it out.
Yeah.
And what I'm, learning now is that there's such a fundamental importance in that root chakra and that sacral chakra. I mean, every chakra has importance, right? But
Right.
I mean, like really, especially if we're somebody who does identify as an empath or with empathetic tendencies, that is really, really, it's really foundational, which is,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's so interesting too, because, so much about like spiritual awakening and third eye and, our evolution there is that, that area of the body specifically opens up. It's about seeing ourself more clearly. And we have appropriate blindfolds according to according to what goes on in our lower body. And so when we're willing to see intuitively what's going down lower in the chakra system and heal and work with that, we become more embodied and more of the third eye starts to open gradually as we are, again, more safety and security in ourselves. We sort of like walked the path more through our healing process. So it is an iterative process, and the third eye does open up as we're again coming. Every time we go back to see something new and uncover something new in our first or second chakras, it's like another aha, another blindfold that removes, and then we see ourselves more clearly.
yeah,
So
I
yeah.
love that. Yeah, in the book you do talk about removing the blindfold as well, and right, and like being able to see things, just more clearly, and be able to kind of really identify in our body a little bit more deeply.
Yeah.
In terms of like, setting boundaries, right, and setting boundaries and clearing that energy field, what are like, just a couple of your practices or your students' practices that you really love to use for that?
Yeah. So grounding is primary. So I would start with the image of the grounding cord and feeling that sense of, I visualize it as a tree trunk. Some people see it as a pillar of light, but I don't see it as a skinny cord from the tailbone into the earth,
Mm.
rather a kind of a wider pillar that secures the sides of the hips, the low belly and low spine, and really plugs us into a sense of safety and security. And that also fuels the base of our body. It also supports our central channel in our body, which I talk about in the book. Our boundaries come from our presence and our radiance and our embodiment. So some tools that are used often, and I do talk about this one in the book, is this bubble of light, or shield of light around the outside of our body, which is nice and it works well in certain situations. It's not a long-term solution for boundaries, for boundaries being more secure. So what I always encourage is that if you're going to use the bubble of light, which is wonderful, then just continue to keep practicing the grounding and the presence of light through the central channel. And sometimes I allow grace to flow through the central channel of my body and allow more of that radiance and presence of who I'm here to be in my body. And that's the foundation to our energetic boundaries. And we can go deeper. I do in the book about healing to allow more of that radiance, because sometimes as we do that, we do bump up against the blocks, the parts of us that we need to see. But that's what I would support, and offer as support, is that grounding, that radiance. And certainly you can use that bubble of light as a secondary support.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that that bubble isn't like the only and the primary, right? Because it's that is kind of like a temporary solution when really needing to clear the whole vessel and to really root in. And you talk a lot about, emotional maturity, right? And I think that this is something that has been huge in my life too, is just being able to like be in conversation interactions, especially as a mentor, and and not take on and be able to have such a clear channel, or have such a rooted and grounded experience, that what's happening, I'm not attaching to myself, right?
Right. Yes, exactly. And in terms of that emotional, we call it, I think I referred to it in the book even as emotional maturity. I mean, that part of us is, we have lived in our conditioning throughout time for human beings, men, women, binary, people, experiencing their emotions through the lens of shame. There's something wrong with me. If I cry, I have to apologize. I shouldn't have a feeling. I shouldn't let other people have their feeling. There's so much societal shaming around emotions. And that when we start to, as empaths, start to recognize, I'm a human being and it's okay for me to have my feeling right now. And I can even remove myself from the conflicting conversation we're having and go take care of myself and breathe. And I can come back when I'm clearer. And we start to develop more permission to feel how we feel, knowing that it's not wrong. Then we're developing the capacity in ourselves to stay present in our body when emotions are happening, whether they are ours or whether they're someone else's. So if I've given myself permission to feel my anger, I'm not scared of so and so's anger. And therefore, that's that fear component, or that, sort of silent shame component, is what causes the energy transfer between people on an emotional level. It's the sense of, oh gosh, I'm afraid this person is angry. This is scary. I'm activated in this moment. My nervous system is activated. I'm freezing in this moment. And in those moments, we do become absorbent. But if we were able to say, okay, you have anger, I'm going to let you be, I'm going over here, I'm going to leave, and I'm going to let you process how you feel, but I don't need to be present for it. That's an empathic way of saying, I'm acknowledging you're okay. I'm okay. This isn't a problem, but I'm going to let you be in it, because I know that when I have anger, I need to go be in my space. And, so that's one example of how we can work with it. But yeah, we develop a capacity for emotions.
I love that. And I think one thing that you said in there that I really took away is staying in your body, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's probably something that, you know, empaths tend to do is, well, I can't handle being in my body, handle, right? I'm having air quotes here. I can't
Yeah.
handle, or it doesn't feel comfortable being in my body. And so then we go up into our head, or,
Yeah.
you know, or then we have this other experience that we don't desire, because, you know, we need to cultivate that trust and that awareness, right? And so I think that's what your book does in such a beautiful way, is helps us to really, it gives us the tools and the ways to really cultivate that trust and open that channel and bring awareness to the experience, right? Without attaching ourselves to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, you know, and we can't control all of our nervous system responses. And not every empath is going to identify with what I'm going to say next, which is that most empaths are slow processors. They do need to stop and think and feel and run a scenario through their system, through their heart, through their mind, through their gut, before they'll have a clear answer. And so sometimes when things are happening so quickly, and we're expected to turn around, or we're expected to give a quick answer, or to manage the situation in, you know, in that moment, that can become a very overwhelming experience to the nervous system of an empath. And so I always say this to empaths, because I am one of, not everyone is, but I am one of, I am this, but it's a slow processor. And I always say, if you're a slow processor, own it. Just say, I'm a slow processor. I'm not sure. I can't give you an answer right now. I will think about it and I will get back to you. And take the time you need, because you're benefiting your nervous system in that moment from experiences where there's such heavy expectation on, you know, speeding up. And you're not meant to speed up. You're meant to stay true to yourself.
Yeah.
For anyone
Yeah.
that might help.
Totally. And that actually, like, my partner popped into my mind, who's a very empathetic person and a slow processor. You know, and I was just like, that makes perfect sense. But also, I think that that also is like one of those things that you say most, and that's okay, because everybody's different. And that kind of is kind of comforting, I think, to some people who are both of those things, to be
Yeah.
like, oh, this makes sense. You know, like I'm working through a lot of feelings, and and it's okay, you know, that I'm a slow processor. Again, not attaching that shame in any way to ourselves and our abilities, right? Our beautiful abilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. So one of the things that I was curious about is, do you feel like, you know, empaths tend to be, you know, the type of people who maybe are more likely to people please, or are the people who are more likely to try to stay out of trouble, or like avoid conflict? Or have you found in all of your work anything like that, where that actually you see like trends for people with
Yeah.
these abilities?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what you're actually talking about is second chakra imbalances that happen when, again, we have a root chakra contraction. So, what will happen is the second chakra, again, its job is to feel the subtle. Its job is to feel the spectrum of emotions and creativity and passion and sexuality. It's also our relationship power center, and it's our empathic power center. So what'll happen is when we lose connection to the earth element through our root chakra, because it's contracted in a fear pattern. You know, it's not okay for me to be me. I can't feel safe in who I am. Really those deeper existential senses of belonging. The second chakra opens up and it moves into that hypervigilant state. The hypervigilance is that it pays attention. We on a subtle level, and this is survival. It does it so we can survive our environment. I am going to pay attention to what everybody's emotional needs are around me, so that I know how to behave in that space so I stay safe. Now,
Yeah.
the byproduct of that is perfectionism. It's overabsorption, it's over caretaking, it's people pleasing, it's keeping the peace. All of those are symptoms out of hypervigilance. I am attuned, highly attuned to what everybody else needs around me, and I disconnect from my own needs. And that is exactly what happens. It's a pattern that opens up, and that repeats itself for empaths in adulthood, where we're going, okay, I'm disconnecting. It happens in a second. I'm disconnecting from myself. I'm going to pay attention to what everybody else needs. And therefore, I don't know. I have no idea how I feel. I'm not sure whose emotions are whose. I've lost myself. So those qualities are very much part of that hypervigilant pattern.
Yeah, I can identify. I can totally, I'm like, oh, okay. Is she talking about me? Does she know?
It's common. It's very common. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that makes so much sense. And I think that this is just so helpful and just information that everybody really needs, because I feel like, even going back to a little bit of what you were talking about with, like, any kind of shame, it's like, you know, we can't shame ourselves into changing, into rooting, into grounding more. We have to love ourselves into that clearer channel, right? And so, for me, who I self-identify as an ex-people pleaser, like, that's just like one of the things that I've really been, but it's not, well, I have to get rid of her. Like, I have to get rid of this part of me that's a people pleaser. And like, she was wrong and she didn't care about herself. And I think that there's actually, part of the coaching industry, which I'm in, which is like, can kind of shame you into feeling like the reasons that you're people pleasing is because you don't feel worthy. And that's not necessary, that's not the case, right? Like, it can be so much deeper than that. And a lot of it can just be that you're actually so gifted. You're actually so, you're so gifted with these intuitive and empathetic abilities.
Yeah. And to add to that, it's interesting because, again, I come back, I'm such a, energy chakra person. So when I come back down into the second chakra and we're talking about this pattern that forms in that area of the body, and you're naming, it's the feminine power center. Like, if there's an imbalance and this power center is imbalanced in that it's too open, or it's activated, or it's in a free state, that the inverse of that is exactly what you're describing. Like, how do we bring that quality of ourselves back into balance? It's the feminine power center, through vulnerability, through self-compassion and love, through forgiveness to self, through, connecting and giving permission to our little inner child there to have all the emotions you want to have about all the things that weren't fair. And you could have the tantrum if you want to have the tantrum. And, it's really nurturing this part of the body that starts to develop more of that sense of self that is needed in place of the pattern of giving self away, caretaking, and all of those other default patterns that were important for survival. We could even thank those patterns without making them wrong. Like, thank you for kicking in a time when when everyone in the system I was involved in growing up needed me to be in this role. And now I'm going to breathe into me here. I'm going to get to know this area of my body in a whole new way and see what power emerges out of my authentic me-ness that's in there.
So good. Yeah. And I think that it's beautiful. One of the things that I'm like, bringing into awareness right now is just like that divine feminine, right? And the womb space and intuition and that second chakra and our sexuality and everything, like, that just holds so much power in that area. And like, so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, it is the power center that is awakening and emerging for all people, for everybody right now. And it's rocking the system that it's emerging. It's taking down, the patriarchal fear-based system that has been sort of oppressing, and in many ways, in many populations, in the feminine, in humanity. And now the feminine is rising in so many ways, and we need it to rise, to come into balance.
Totally. Yeah. And what I wanted to kind of, pop into today too, is also talking about like being an empath right now in the world is, phew, it's a lot, right? There's so much information. There's so much emotion. There's just so much happening and I think for me, like what I have found is that I have a hard time processing everything. Like I have a hard time. And one of the things I also noticed is like, I have a hard time figuring out like what's my truth, like how do I ground in this experience when all of it makes sense to me, all of it, and like there's just so much in in so many different ways. And I can feel, for me it's like I can feel pain for everybody in a situation, or I can feel, or like whatever it is, the experience that they're going through. I'm like, oh man, I can feel for all of them. And so it's been a tough year for us empaths. Huh?
Absolutely. And I think this is one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book is that, so let me say this. Some people, not everybody identifies as an empath, but with the nature of our systems changing and the spiritual awakenings and the evolution that's occurring, there is a lot of trauma in the field. And we're invited to heal personally our personal traumas and what we have carried through in this lifetime and intergenerationally and through our ancestral line, that it's our responsibility to heal, whether we want to or not. If we choose it, it can stop with us or it transforms with us. So there is that invitation to do that work, and everybody's having empathic experiences, whether or not they identify as that. So here we are in a time period where, there's lots of different things. We say it's the beginning of the Sat Yuga, it's the end of the Kali Yuga, it's the start of the age of the Aquarius, it's there's all this different spiritual terminology in the world. And at the same time, we have some of the biggest human rights issues at the surface, and inviting all of us to wake up and shake up what we have inherently carried that have contributed to our implicit biases, whether we've wanted that or not. It's in our face. And so the invitation here, as everything has been going on in the world, first of all, is to do what you can. And I say this to people all the time, is that we can turn the corner and there can be check off the issues: climate change, racism, white privilege, healthcare. You could go down the list of like where we could be putting our time and attention for our own deepest healing. And we do what you can to out there, but the most important work for us individually is also internally. Like, what is it touching in us? And what do we need to bring to the surface inside us for deep healing? And how are we going to contribute and have our legacy here on this planet? I know that I have to come back to a very base question for myself as an empath all the time. And the question is, what do you need right now? Little self, inner child, what do you need? What do you need right now? And why are you here? I always have to come back to that question inside myself and my own purpose. Why are you here? Why are you here on this planet? And so if you're here for this, whatever it is, how do you want to take care of yourself today so you can continue to do more of that in the world and make impact that way? So yes, at some point we do need to cut, sort of push back on all the infiltration and get very clear in where we can contribute and where can do our deeper inner healing work.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. It really is about centering in and really establishing, again, grounding in, centering in, and really establishing, what am I here to do? And how am I doing that? And for me, a lot of difficult conversations, right? And difficult conversations in the last year have been, they've been a lot for a lot of people, and being able to advocate for the necessary things that you feel very called to do can come with these conversations. But I noticed that I can have these difficult conversations and really stay heart-centered and rooted and grounded. But then also, once that difficult conversation is over, like I need a reprieve. Like I need to take my energetic field and cleanse it and really, take some breaths and then re-ground in separately from that. Right. And that's been so foundational to me because I can get so passionate about human rights, and I can just be so passionate and I'm like, duh! And then I have to be like, in order to get my, the message across, you have to stay, calm, cool, collected, and grounded in your energy.
Yeah, and to that, part of our evolution as a species is that we are multisensory beings, and that as we start to recognize like this intuition, sensitivity, empathic thing is not woo-woo, and it's not fragmented from the rest of our being. Like as we start to embrace, oh wow, I am a multisensory being, which means I need to take care of myself in a totally different way than what was taught to me. And now I know what I need as an empath and how to take care of myself. I'm going to step up, have those conversations, advocate for what I want to advocate. And yeah, I do need to go for a walk afterwards. So I do need to go take a salt bath or something to come back to self. And we start to take care of ourselves in different ways.
Yeah. And you're right. We're totally in this space now where, we're awakening on a completely different level. Like for me, there's a reason why this is all, coming up to the surface now, right? To be transmuted, to be changed, to really allow this world that we want to live in, look more peaceful and more prosperous and have more of that unity consciousness, right? And I think that that's such a beautiful thing. And it's really important that we understand ourselves and our bodies if we want to go out and make this change in the world, right? Because we can go out guns a-blazing, but not literally, obviously. But, and then, we just feel all disorganized, discombobulated, and we end up acting from ego and all of these things can happen. So that's why becoming an empowered empath, right? The word empowered can be, it's just beautiful and it's necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's well said. In terms of our reactivity in the world, or are we coming from a grounded and connected place who's very sustained in our mission and why we're here? Absolutely.
Okay. Can we let go of that ego self and lean into that soul self and let that part of ourselves lead?
Right. I always think that, the soul sustains the candle and the ego likes to burn the matches. So we like burn ourselves, we burn ourselves out. Ego burns ourselves out, but the soul wants to sustain the inner light and keep, fueling and doing things in life that are going to come from soul to sustain that inner presence.
Yeah, I really, really love that visual too. That I'm a big visual person. If you can give me something where I'm like, oh, now I can see that, like finding the soul in the body. I'm like, whoa, finding the soul in the body. That's great. Brilliant, Wendy. I love it so much. It's so good. Wendy, I am so grateful to have you here. This is amazing. I actually have Wendy's book right here, Becoming an Empowered Empath, How to Clear Energy, Set Boundaries, and Embody Your Intuition. It's amazing. I read it. I love it. And the link to all of Wendy's information will be in the show notes of this podcast. So we'll have Wendy give all that information and, order this book, really dive in. If you're that heart-centered person, really give yourself the opportunity to work with your gifts and abilities. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to be here. Thank you.